take three. Then one day he took Jesus for tea. Jesus helped him to change. Well, Jesus helps babies and goodies and baddies. Jesus helps lazies and happies and saddies. Jesus helps lonelies and moms, kids and daddies. And Jesus wants us to help too. One time to Emmaus, as all will agree, it's wise to keep shouting as loud as could be. Oh, you sons of David, have mercy on me. Jesus opened his eyes. Well, Jesus helps babies and goodies and baddies. Jesus helps lazies and happies and saddies. Jesus helps lonelies and moms, kids and daddies. And Jesus wants us to help too. So Mother, it's really my right to protest. I'm working so hard here while Mary just rests. Jesus replied, Mary's chosen the best. Love, come talk to me too. Well, Jesus helps babies and goodies and baddies. Jesus helps lazies and happies and saddies. Jesus helps lonelies and moms, kids and daddies. And Jesus wants us to help too. Once a poor woman who no one could bear cried as she wiped Jesus' feet with her hair. She had found someone she knew really cared. Jesus made her so glad. Well, Jesus helps babies and goodies and baddies. Jesus helps lazies and happies and saddies. Jesus helps lonelies and moms, kids and daddies. And Jesus wants us to help too.
Good morning, everyone. Our first Bible reading this morning is taken from the second book of Samuel, chapter 23. I will be reading from verse 1 to verse 7. Now these are the last words of David. Thus says David, the son of Jesse. Thus says the man raised up on high, the anointed of the God of Jacob, and the sweet psalmist of Israel. The Spirit of the Lord spoke to me, and his word was on my tongue. The God of Israel said, the Rock of Israel spoke to me. He who rules over man must be just, ruling in the fear of God. And he shall be like the light of the morning when the sun rises, a morning without clouds, like the tender grass springing out of the earth, by clear shining after rain. Although my house is not so with God, yet he has made with me an everlasting covenant, ordered in all things and secure. For this is all my salvation and all my desire. Will he not make it increase? But the sons of rebellion shall all be as thorns thrust away, because they cannot be taken with hands. But the man who touches them must be armed with iron and the shaft of a spear, and they shall be utterly burned with fire in their place. Our second Bible reading is from the Gospel of John, chapter 18. I will be reading from verses 33 to verse 37. Then Pilate entered the praetorium again, called Jesus, and said to him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered him, "Are you speaking for yourself about this, or did others tell you this concerning me?" Pilate answered, "Am I a Jew? Your own nation and the chief priests have delivered you to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would fight so that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now my kingdom is not from here." Pilate therefore said to him, "Are you a king then?" Jesus answered, "You say rightly that I am a king. For this cause I was born, and for this cause I have come into the world, that I should bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth hears my voice." That is the word of the Lord. Members have a song to sing to everyone this morning, And I would like to invite Jeremy to come and explain the song to everyone.
Good morning, guys. This morning, I was being asked to explain a bit of our culture. Then I'll explain what song we'll be singing this morning. So, as you can see, what I'm wearing, you'll be. This is called Sulu. It's like a skirt. And as you can see, Sani, as she stood up here and read the Bible, as you can see, her clothes is all, yes, and to the floor, yes. It is essentially a kilt worn to formal and traditional events, from business meeting to church. It shows respect, a certain formality and modesty. The missionaries, they brought it to Fiji. So it's called Sulu. The Sulu was introduced by missionaries that arrived in Fiji in the 19th century. As they introduced Christianity to the island, they also ensured that the Christians adopted a more modest form of attire. Today, Fiji, primarily being a Christian nation, it is considered inappropriate to be like naked or show a lot of skin unless you are near the beach. As a result, Fijians wear fairly conservative clothes for cultural occasions. As for everyday wear, like most of the world, we too wear Western style clothes. So I think that's about it. I think you have quite of understanding why we wear, men wear this Sulu, and Fijian ladies wear clothes that goes all the way down to the floor. Yes, you can say that, to the floor. Anyway, this morning we'll be singing a song called, in English, Have you any room for Jesus? He who bore your load of sin, as he knocks and asks admission, sinner, will you let him in? Room for Jesus, and this is the chorus. Room for Jesus, King of glory. Hasten now, his word obey. Swing the heart's door widely open, bid him enter while you may. So even though we will be singing in Fijian and we'll be using Fijian words, just the harmonies and all those little things, I hope you'll be blessed by it. And I now invite my Fijian families to come up and sing our Fijian hymn.
Sambu
Isn't that beautiful? Just lovely. And you don't have to know the language, and you just, the rhythm and the vibe, and it was just beautiful. Thank you so much. Just a real privilege to be here today and hear that. Let us pray. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Do you ever wonder whether the place in which a story of the New Testament happens has an importance that we might overlook? Do you ever wonder? Do you ever wonder about that the passages that we hear and we reflect on has an importance that we might overlook? Today's Gospel reading happens in the headquarters of Pirates' Inner Sanctum. And I'm going to show my age a bit here, because anybody from the 1960s, I don't want you to put your hands up, fans of the TV series Get Smart, and I used to love Get Smart, and I should have just had that bit of music, you know, that bit of music at the start. But you might remember the opening titles and the rigmarole that Maxwell Smart had to go through to get into the headquarters. It was a great long tunnel, wasn't it? You know, and it's just, you know, all these doors and things banged and clanged and what have you in my memory. But as Maxwell Smart had to do that, have you ever yourself entered an old castle or an old military barracks where you know that there are a lot of walls, barriers, fortifications, gates and doors? Have you ever been to one of those places, and the old castles and wherever, when you've got to do all that stuff to get through to where you would hope to reach the inner sanctum and the person who ruled there? However, today, we do not have to navigate our way through the fortress as Maxwell Smart did, or for us today to come face to face with God. There are no barricades between we and Christ, the King of Love. So today we hear of Christ redefining the term of king. And as we gather for worship on this Sunday of the year, and as I explained before, looking back across another year nearly completed, and look ahead to a new year that will end, who knows where, and the passing of time itself confronts us with many, many questions. And I'm not going to go into all of that. But when we finish one year and we go into the next, we wonder what is going to be there, and have all those questions. Simply because the church's own unique way of marking time proclaims to us the answer, holding before us the transcendent fact of our faith, our truth, which alone enables us to live lives filled with meaning and purpose and joy and hope. And joy and hope, those things that we're going to be talking about in the next few weeks as we lead up to Christmas. This annual cycle or way of marking time, known as the liturgical calendar, dramatically portrays the life of Christ and the life of his church, proclaiming his birth, his death and resurrection, therefore challenging our spirit-empowered response today. What does all that mean to us as we think about Jesus' birth, the death coming at Easter time, and the resurrection? This is our liturgical year. This is who we are, and this is why we come to worship God. For example, it's a concept that is like a circle, which has neither a beginning or an end. Rather, the church, the calendar is like a spiral. It's like one of those jet engines that moves us forward. As the propellers go, it moves us forward. Or it can be a bit like when you're trying to, for the men, when you're trying to put a screw into something, you know that if you twist and you turn and you twist and you turn, you will come to an end of each rotation. And you get to your final goal, whether you're in a plane or if you're just doing a bit of carpentry. The goal is the kingship of Christ. The answer to all our questions of existence is the King of Christ. And yet another question for us today could be, are you a king? That's what is asked. Are you a king? Are you a king? In version 2 of the vision 2 in 2 Samuel that Sandy read, and John, and in Revelation, which was one of our readings, that if you do the readings for the week in Revelation, in those readings it's full of imagery and emotion, as we notice the many titles given to Jesus, including Jesus Christ, faithful witness, the firstborn of the dead. Today we are asked to think about the image we have of kings and queens in order to see if there is a better way to view the use of power by those who make decisions that affect the ordinary people like ourselves through their leadership of the nations. And even though the leaders are appointed or elected in a more democratic way, these days, this is no guarantee that they will govern more fairly than royal figures of the past. We are continually challenged when we see the world through the eyes of the one who loves and cares for us all. Even though God is more than we can ever imagine and whose power is far beyond our understanding, we are confronted in the reading from John's Gospel to the vision of a different form of kingdom. This kingdom is not one that benefits only those who rule or have great power. It is a kingdom built on love, care, and trust. Love, care, and trust. People are treated equally and are included in all aspects of the kingdom's life and benefits. For example, the Jewish leaders wanted to rid themselves of Jesus, They didn't want Jesus anymore, so they trumped up charges that he was setting himself up as a king. Who does Jesus think he is? Not having authority to execute Jesus, however, themselves, they hoped to persuade Rome to do their duty for them. And the best bet was to persuade Pilate that Jesus intended to set himself up as a king, as a rival to Rome. The Romans didn't care much about Jewish theology, but they did care about the threats to their own power. If Jesus were setting himself up as king, you can be sure that Pilate would be interested. But Pilate was no fool. When he first encountered Jesus, he asked, "Are you the King of the Jews? Are you the King of the Jews?" And we are reminded that Jesus never, ever quite answers the question. Their conversation made clear that Jesus poses no threat to Rome, and Pilate understood that there was something going on, but he just wasn't quite clear of what was happening. And I guess that bothered him a bit. He didn't trust the Jewish leaders and suspected that they were trying to put a fast one over him, but he couldn't quite figure it out. And I imagine that Pilate must have asked himself, what in the world is going on here? What is the game that's being played here? And in his conversation with Pilate, Jesus made it clear that he considered himself to be a king, but not in the way that the Romans needed or feared. His kingdom was not of this world. His kingdom was not of this world, he said. So Pilate tried to convince the Jewish leaders that he found no case against Jesus. No case against Jesus. He considered Jesus to be innocent. And when Pilate tried to persuade the Jewish leaders to free Jesus as part of the holiday celebration, but the Jewish leaders chose Barabbas instead and continued to press for Jesus' crucifixion. However, what Pilate couldn't see, and the Jewish leaders couldn't see, and even the disciples couldn't see, was that Jesus was a king. Jesus was a king. And that he would rule over more people than Pilate or Herod or even Caesar. None of them could imagine the billions of people would call Jesus Lord. They couldn't imagine that people in unknown lands on faraway continents would build great churches in Jesus' honour and sing, as the Fijians have done today, in great honour of Jesus. And build hospitals and orphanages and schools. None of them could foresee that men and women all over the world would fall on their knees and worship Jesus. And none of them could envisage that Jesus' reign would really begin with his crucifixion, and that his suffering and death would save the world. Amazing, isn't it? To all our profound questions of existence, meaning and purpose and hope, this Christ the King Sunday answers loud and clear. To my death and resurrection, the kingdoms of this world have been transformed forever. The governor who holds life and death in his hands meets the one who offers his life for all. And that's you and me. Truth cannot be assessed by any rational understanding or turning of some textbook, but by revelation. This truth is not a philosophy Jesus offers, but it is grounded deep within his being, God's Son. This truth is not a static belief, but it is a dynamically lived out in faithfulness, in actions such as calling the marginalised to his side, in obedience to God that seeks to do God's will, not one's own. This way of life is so ingrained in Jesus, is so important to who he is and what he does, that he is willing to give his life for this truth. And ever since the promise in 2 Samuel of an eternal throne in David's line, the vision of the reign of God's monarch has been a beacon of hope for God's people. And in With Love, those that read With Love to the World, on Tuesday in the blurb it said of 2 Samuel, David is portrayed as a person following God's heart, a person who is following God's heart as part of his betrayal. As his betrayal, the biblical texts are not shy about mentioning his flaws and his passions. He had a lot of struggles, David did, a lot of struggles. These words are attributed to David as a psalm or prayer offered at the end of his life. And we might imagine David, knowing his death is not far off, reflecting on what good leadership looks like. And he was reflecting on what good leadership looks like because he struggled. And he goes on to use the image of basking in a beautiful warm morning sunshine to describe what it is like when the leader and God pursue justice together. Isn't that beautiful? It's a lovely image. And as we connect with life today, the comedian Groucho Marx once remarked, "Hey, these are my principles, my moral principles, and if you don't like them, I've got others." He was quite a comedian. But when we think about that today, it may seem that the prevailing philosophy today is that the only truth is that there is no truth for so many. The only truth is no truth. This reality leaves most of us empty, adrift, lifeless. Some may turn to politics searching for that honest person. We may turn to the church thinking that certainty would model the truth. And sometimes it doesn't do that. Sometimes we discover cults and schisms and programs and inquisitions. And again in With Love to the World on Saturday, it said, in a world of fake news and uncertainty, it seems apt to add Pilate's response to Jesus, which is in verse 38, the next verse on from our readings today. And this is where Pilate often quoted words come into play when he said, "What is truth? What is truth?" With these words, Pilate dismisses Jesus. He has not changed by his encounter with Jesus, but he carries on as he always has. Pilate's question pushes us also today to wonder how we too might recognise what is truth around us, especially if we name Christ's reign as true. Then how does that shape our day-to-day lives? How do we engage those people and ideas that seek out our loyalty? Thank goodness today in 2 Samuel, it reminds us that a good leader is one who rules over people justly. What role can we as communities of faith play in identifying and encouraging people who truly, genuinely practice justice and righteousness to seek positions of leadership? According to this week's reading from 1 Revelation, I encourage you to read that, 1 Revelation verses 4 to 8. It addresses communities who are trying to find truth, to make sense of how God is present among them and how they can bear witness to Christ, the faithful witness, the firstborn of the dead, and the ruler of all the kings of the earth. Here at the end of the Bible, we find that truth, which sees the one who stands at both the beginning and the end of time as bringing in the fulfilment of God's reign. We live in a land of the biggest and best, but Jesus did his work by becoming the littlest and the least. It went against everything that Pilate knew, and it goes against everything that we know too, but it worked. And we have to admit that it worked all through the centuries, all over the world. The people have made Christ king over their lives, not in spite of the cross, but because of it. It is mind-boggling. It really is mind-boggling when you think about it. And those people, the ones who made Christ king over their lives, they changed the world. They changed the world. And that isn't an easy thing to do. If it were easy, we would have done it and we would have got it right a long time ago. The main role is to put this vision into action and to continue to ask the big questions of the deepest meaning to each other. Does my life have purpose, meaning, and hope? Our answers to these questions have implications for all our relationships through our actions, and that clearly demonstrate that we and God are truthful in caring for others. The benefits of God's kingdom flow down to all, not just a few. We are all beneficiaries of God's love and agents of God's love and justice by the way we live our lives. And finally today, I just reflect on David's knowing that his death was not far off as well, basking in the beautiful warm morning sunshine to describe what it is like when the leader and God pursue justice together. Let us pray. Jesus answered Pilate by saying, "My kingdom is not of this world. In my kingdom, if my kingdom were from this world, my followers would be fighting to keep me from being handed over." Making Jesus king over our life isn't a one-off deal. It involves more than one decision for Christ. Making Jesus king over our lives is something that we have to do day by day, even minute by minute. It is something that we can do only by prayer and by the grace of God. Let me offer you a prayer to pray. Dear God, your will, nothing more, nothing less, nothing else. If you want a formula to change your life, that's all. Pray that prayer daily and then try to live it. Dear God, your will, nothing more, nothing less, nothing else. Make Christ king over our lives today and see what blessings he imparts to each one of us. I'm sure we'll never be sorry that we have. Amen.